On their wedding night, he whispered, "Trust me," and she melted completely in his arms. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive right into today's story. Amelia had never imagined that her life would take a turn like this. She wasn't one for grand dreams or fairy tales. In fact, her life had always been a series of practical decisions, one after the other. So when the offer came from Victor, a wealthy businessman with an intimidating aura, she had been surprised, but also desperate. Amelia had been struggling for months, her small bookstore in the city center barely staying afloat. She had bills piling up, her rent overdue, and no way out. She had made a promise to her late mother to keep the store alive, but the weight of it all was pushing her to the brink. And then came Victor. The proposal had sounded insane at first, a business deal disguised as a marriage. He wanted her to marry him, but not for love. He needed a wife for public appearances, a woman who could help him secure his family's legacy. It was an offer that seemed too good to refuse. All she had to do was sign a contract. She'd marry him, live with him, and play the role of his wife in front of the world. No feelings, no love, just a marriage of convenience. But as the wedding day came closer, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had agreed to the deal for financial stability, but she hadn't expected to feel anything at all. She had convinced herself that it was just another business transaction, nothing more. The night of the wedding arrived, and everything felt surreal. The venue was grand, the guests elegant, and yet, Amelia felt out of place. She wore a beautiful gown, a far cry from the second-hand clothes she was used to. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, and as the ceremony began, she couldn't help but wonder if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. After the vows, when the guests had left, and it was just the two of them, Victor led her to the bridal suite. The room was dimly lit, and the atmosphere felt tense. Amelia stood by the window, gazing out at the city lights. Victor approached her quietly, his presence commanding yet gentle. As he stood behind her, he whispered, "Trust me." Those words, simple yet powerful, seemed to hang in the air. Amelia felt a shiver run down her spine. She didn't know what it was, but something about the way he said it made her feel vulnerable, exposed. She turned around to face him, searching his eyes for any sign of dishonesty. But there was none. For the first time that night, she felt a small flicker of something in her chest. She didn't know what it was. Maybe it was the beginning of trust, or maybe it was the first hint of what could be something more. But as Victor wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, she felt herself melting. She couldn't help it. The tension that had built up inside her seemed to dissolve in his embrace. She had come into this marriage with so many doubts, so much uncertainty. But in that moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was something real here after all. She closed her eyes and let herself be held, letting go of all the fears and reservations that had been weighing her down. This wasn't the life she had planned for herself, but perhaps it was the life she needed. Amelia could feel her heart beating faster, not from fear, but from something else, something unexpected, something that felt like hope. And as the night stretched on, the two of them stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, with a future full of possibilities ahead of them. It had been a few weeks since Amelia's wedding night, and things hadn't turned out the way she expected. The tension from that first night had faded, but something else had taken its place, an unexpected connection. Victor, despite his cold and businesslike exterior, had shown her glimpses of warmth that she hadn't anticipated. Amelia had come into this marriage with nothing but skepticism, but now, she found herself looking at Victor differently. As the days passed, their interactions began to shift. In the mornings, Victor would leave early for meetings, leaving Amelia to her own devices. At first, she felt isolated in his mansion, a stranger in a world that was so far removed from her own. But slowly, she began to settle in. She spent her days working on the projects Victor had set for her, attending social events, making appearances, and even taking over some of his public relations work. As she worked, she started to understand his world better, but there was still a part of her that felt disconnected. One afternoon, As she was preparing for yet another gala, she sat by the window, looking out at the city. The weight of it all started to hit her. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. She was becoming part of this life. She had to admit, despite the arrangement, she was starting to care for Victor. It wasn't love, not yet. But there was something there, something real. As the evening of the gala approached, Victor's presence in her life began to feel less like an obligation and more like something she wanted to hold on to. When she stepped into the ballroom, dressed in an elegant gown, she felt a strange sense of pride. She wasn't the same woman who had walked down the aisle a few weeks ago. She was confident, strong, and yes, maybe a little bit in love. The event was a blur of high society and endless conversations. Amelia moved through the crowd with ease, playing the role she had been cast into so perfectly. But it wasn't the glittering chandeliers or the fine wine that kept her attention. It was Victor. He was standing across the room, talking to a group of business associates, his sharp gaze scanning the room. For a moment, their eyes met. The world seemed to stop, and in that instant, Amelia realized how much she had changed. She had spent so much time trying to keep her distance from Victor, but now, she couldn't deny the pull. As the night wore on, she found herself standing next to him by the balcony. The cool night air brushed against her skin as they stood in comfortable silence. Victor turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, his voice soft but sincere. Amelia felt her heart skip a beat. She hadn't expected him to say something like that. His words were simple, but they meant more than she was willing to admit. "Thank you," she replied, her voice a little shakier than she'd like. Victor didn't push her further. Instead, he reached for her hand, his touch gentle yet firm. "Amelia, I know this wasn't how either of us expected things to go," he began, his eyes meeting hers. "But I want you to know, I don't take this marriage lightly. And I don't want to keep pretending that it's just a business arrangement. There's more to this, and I need you to trust me." Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard those words before, but this time, they felt different. He wasn't just playing his part anymore. He was opening up. And for the first time since their wedding, Amelia felt the weight of her emotions shift. She wasn't sure if she was ready to admit it, but she knew that she had fallen for him. As the night ended and they made their way back to the mansion, Amelia couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. It wasn't just the words that had stuck with her. It was the sincerity in his voice, the look in his eyes. For the first time, she felt like Victor wasn't just a man she had married out of necessity. He was someone she could love. And for the first time, Amelia allowed herself to imagine what a real future with him could look like. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she knew one thing. She wasn't alone in this anymore. It had been a month since the gala, and things between Amelia and Victor had changed in ways she hadn't expected. What started as a business arrangement had slowly transformed into something more complex. They had settled into a comfortable routine, with Victor continuing his work while Amelia managed the social side of their partnership. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Victor's presence, once just a reminder of her financial security, had become something more meaningful. Amelia was starting to realize that she was no longer just playing a part. She was truly becoming part of his life. Yet, even with these growing feelings, there were still moments of uncertainty. Amelia often wondered if she was just a convenience to Victor, someone to help him maintain appearances, or if he truly saw her as more than that. She had been hesitant to ask him directly, afraid of what the answer might be, but the question lingered in her mind. It was during one of these moments of doubt that Victor called her into his office. He had been distant for the past few days, immersed in a new project, and Amelia couldn't help but feel a little ignored. She had gotten used to his presence, and the sudden absence made her uneasy. When she entered the office, she found him sitting at his desk, his expression unreadable. He looked up as she walked in, offering her a small smile. "I've been meaning to talk to you," he said, his voice calm but firm. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this conversation could be about. Was it time to end this marriage, to return to the business-like terms they had originally agreed upon? Or was there something else? "What's on your mind?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Victor stood up and walked over to the window, his back to her for a moment. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he began, his voice softer now, more vulnerable. "And I know I've been busy, but I don't want you to think that I'm taking you for granted. I know this marriage wasn't something you chose out of love, but I want you to know that I care about you. More than I thought I would. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. The words she had been waiting for, but didn't dare to hope for, were finally being spoken. Victor turned to face her, his eyes serious, but filled with something else, something Amelia hadn't seen before. I know I've been distant, and I'm sorry for that, he continued. But I want to change that. I want us to be more than just a contract. I want to be with you, Amelia. Amelia stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. Her mind raced, trying to process what he had just said. Could it be true? Could he really feel the same way she did? She had always told herself that this was just a way out of her financial troubles. But now, with Victor standing before her, his words hitting her heart in a way she couldn't explain, she wasn't so sure anymore. You don't have to say anything right now, Victor added, as if sensing her hesitation. I just wanted to be honest with you. I don't want to keep pretending that this is just a marriage for convenience. I want us to build something real. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, Amelia could only look at him in silence. She felt a mix of emotions, relief, hope, and something else she wasn't ready to name. I need some time, she finally said, her voice quiet but steady. I need to think about this. Victor nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. As Amelia left his office, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. Victor's confession had lifted a weight from her chest, and yet, she knew she still had decisions to make. She couldn't ignore the growing feelings she had for him, but she also couldn't ignore the uncertainty that still lingered. The next few days were filled with contemplation. Amelia spent more time in the bookstore, the one place where she felt truly herself. As she worked, she found herself thinking about Victor and the future they could have together. She realized that despite everything, despite the uncertainty and the complications, she wanted to try. She wanted to see where this could go. And when she finally made her decision, she knew it wouldn't be easy, but it was the right one. She would go to him, tell him how she felt, and see if they could make something real out of the life they had started together. And so, on a quiet evening, when Victor returned from work, Amelia was waiting for him in the living room, her heart pounding in her chest. She stood up as he entered, and without a word, she walked over to him. Victor, she began, her voice shaky but resolute. I've been thinking, and I want to try. I want us to make this real. Victor's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and joy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. You have no idea how happy that makes me, he whispered. And for the first time in a long while, Amelia felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Amelia had made her decision, and now she was ready to face the consequences of her choice. It had been weeks since she told Victor she wanted to make their marriage real, and though the uncertainty still lingered in the back of her mind, she couldn't help but feel excited about what the future held. They had spent the following days growing closer, discovering new sides to each other. Victor had opened up in ways he hadn't before, and Amelia, for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to feel like she truly belonged. But as they moved forward, Amelia knew that things couldn't stay the same forever. She had to confront the elephant in the room, the part of their relationship that had always been a business arrangement, the very foundation of their marriage. It was inevitable that the truth would come out. Amelia couldn't keep pretending that everything was perfect. She needed to ask the question that had been gnawing at her. Did Victor truly love her, or was this still just a contract, something that had gone a little deeper than either of them expected? It was one evening, after a long day of meetings and events, that she finally decided to confront him. They sat together in the living room, a quiet moment in the midst of their busy lives. Victor, as usual, was reading through some business reports, while Amelia sat beside him, her mind elsewhere. She had rehearsed her words countless times in her head, but now that the moment was here, she found it harder to speak. Victor noticed her silence and looked up from his papers, concern flashing in his eyes. Amelia, what's on your mind? He asked, his voice soft, but with an edge of worry. Amelia took a deep breath and looked at him. She had always been straightforward with him, and she wasn't going to start hiding her feelings now. Victor, we've been pretending for so long. I know we started this marriage as a contract, but I need to know if there's more to this for you. Is this real, or are we just playing the part we agreed on? She asked, her voice steady, but her heart racing. The question hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Victor put down his papers and turned toward her, his gaze softening. He took her hands in his his touch warm and reassuring. Amelia, I know we started this as a business arrangement, and I never wanted to make you feel like this wasn't real. But what we have now, it's real. I know I haven't been the easiest person to understand, and I didn't always show you how much you mean to me, but I'm here now. I want this to be real. I want you to be more than just my wife by name. I want you to be my partner in every way. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. His words, so simple yet so sincere, melted the last of her doubts. She had been afraid to ask this question, afraid that the answer would change everything. But now she realized that it had already changed. She felt his sincerity, his vulnerability, and for the first time, she knew without a doubt that he wasn't just fulfilling an obligation. He was choosing her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she squeezed his hands. I'm so scared, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Scared that I've let myself fall for you, and it's not real. Victor gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Amelia, love isn't something you can force, and it's not something that can be built overnight. But what we have, it's real, and I don't want to let that go. I want to prove that to you, every day. I want you to see that you're not just here because of a contract. You're here because I love you, and I always have. His words, so simple but filled with so much emotion, made Amelia's heart swell. She had been so afraid of what might happen, of what the truth might be, but now she realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about trust, honesty, and the willingness to be vulnerable with someone else. And with Victor, she knew she had found someone who was ready to be just as vulnerable with her. I love you too, she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. I was just so scared to admit it. Victor pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as they both embraced the moment. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic confession, just the simple, undeniable truth that they had found something real in each other. The future was still uncertain, and there would be challenges ahead, but in that moment, with their arms wrapped around each other, Amelia knew that whatever happened, they would face it together. It wasn't a perfect love story. It was messy, complicated, and full of ups and downs, but it was their story, and that was enough. And as the night stretched on, they held each other tightly, knowing that this was just the beginning of their journey together. The days following their heart-to-heart conversation were filled with a sense of peace that Amelia had never known before. She had always been guarded, always afraid to let someone in completely, but with Victor, something had shifted. He had shown her a side of him she had never expected to see, a man who was willing to put his heart on the line, who truly wanted to make this work. Amelia found herself waking up every morning with a sense of hope. She no longer felt like she was living in the shadow of a contract, but in the light of a partnership that held real meaning. They spent more time together, not just at social events or business meetings, but in quiet moments, simple conversations over coffee, walks through the garden, evenings spent watching old movies. Amelia realized that she was no longer just playing a role in Victor's life. She was an active part of it. But as with any relationship, challenges soon began to arise. Amelia had started to feel the weight of her new role, not just as Victor's wife, but as the woman who had once been his business arrangement. There were still whispers in the media about their arranged marriage, and the pressure from society was beginning to take a toll. Amelia had learned to ignore the public's judgment before, but now, with her heart fully invested in this marriage, it was harder to brush it off. One evening, as they attended another high-profile event, Amelia felt the familiar eyes of the press following them. She could feel their gazes on her, and it made her uncomfortable. Victor noticed immediately. Ignore them, he whispered in her ear, his hand gently resting on her back as they walked. They don't know the truth. Amelia wanted to believe him, but the doubt still lingered. As they moved through the event, the flashes of cameras and the murmurs of the crowd made her feel like she was standing on display. She knew she had to address her fears with Victor, but she didn't want to seem weak. After the event, they returned home, and as they walked into the living room, Amelia couldn't hold it in anymore. Victor, she began, her voice hesitant, I know we've been through a lot, but I'm still struggling with all of this. I'm still that girl who married you for security. I don't want to be seen as a fake. I want to be real with you, but I'm afraid I'm not strong enough to handle what's out there. Victor turned to face her, his eyes soft and understanding. Amelia, I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this. I know it hasn't been easy, but this is real, and I will never let you feel like you're just a role in my life. I know what we've been through, and I know the world has a lot to say about it. But you and we're building something here. You're not just my wife because of a deal. You're my wife because I chose you. Because I love you. His words struck Amelia deeply. She had never heard him speak so openly about their relationship before, and it melted away the last of her insecurities. I love you too, she whispered, her voice breaking. And I want to be with you, no matter what the world thinks. Victor smiled, pulling her close. Then let's face this together. No more hiding. No more pretending. We'll make our own truth, no matter what anyone else says. From that night on, Amelia felt a shift. She no longer felt like an outsider in her own marriage. She and Victor began to make their own rules, build their own narrative. They were no longer just the wealthy businessman and his wife. They were partners, building a life that was uniquely theirs. But the real test came when Amelia's past came knocking. A former associate from her bookstore, someone she hadn't seen in years, contacted her. He was struggling, and Amelia felt the need to help. It was a complicated situation, and Victor was understandably concerned. They had worked so hard to build a stable life, and now, someone from Amelia's past was threatening to disrupt it. But as they sat down to talk about it, Victor's expression softened. I trust you, Amelia, he said, and I know your heart. If this is something you need to do, I'll be here to support you. Just remember, we're a team. His words reassured her. She knew that no matter what came their way, they would face it together. Amelia had come a long way from the woman who married Victor out of necessity. Now, she was a woman who loved him deeply and knew that their future was no longer just a business arrangement. It was a partnership that had the power to withstand anything. As they continued to grow together, Amelia felt more at home with Victor than she ever thought possible. This wasn't just the beginning of their story. It was the beginning of a life they would share, built on trust, love, and the kind of connection that couldn't be faked. And with each passing day, Amelia realized that the life she had once dreamed of was right here, beside the man who had shown her what it meant to truly love and be loved in return. The days passed, and life seemed to settle into a new rhythm for Amelia and Victor. The tension that had once defined their marriage was gone, replaced by a quiet, shared understanding. Their bond had grown stronger, built on trust, respect, and a growing love that neither of them had anticipated. The media no longer seemed as intrusive, and the pressures of their public lives had become easier to handle. Still, there were moments when Amelia would catch herself reflecting on the incredible transformation her life had gone through. She had gone from a woman on the brink of losing everything to the wife of a man she had learned to love deeply. She had never imagined that a contract marriage could turn into something so meaningful, but here they were, building a life together. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, a sense of contentment settled over Amelia. The fireplace crackled softly in the background, casting a warm glow across the room. Victor was reading, as he often did in the evenings, while Amelia was lost in her own thoughts. She had become more involved in the charity work that Victor supported, something she had always wanted to do, but never had the chance. Her involvement had become her passion, and Victor supported her every step of the way. It was one of those moments when Amelia realized how far she had come. Victor, she began, her voice soft. Do you remember when we first met? When we decided to do this marriage? Victor looked up from his book, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I remember, he said, his tone gentle. It seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? Amelia nodded, her eyes filled with emotion. I never thought I would find happiness like this, she confessed, her voice breaking slightly. I came into this marriage thinking it was just a way to survive, but now, she trailed off, unsure of how to express the depth of her feelings. Victor set his book aside and moved closer to her. He reached out, taking her hand in his thumb gently brushing over her knuckles. Amelia, he said, his voice sincere. I never thought I would find someone like you either. This marriage, it started as a business deal, but it has turned into something more. Something real. And I can't imagine my life without you in it. Amelia felt her heart swell at his words. She had never expected to hear him say something like that, and it meant more to her than she could express. Victor, she whispered, I love you. More than I thought I ever could. He smiled, a soft, knowing smile, and pulled her into a hug. I love you too, he whispered back. The moment was simple, but it was everything. For the first time, Amelia felt completely at peace with her life, with their life together. But just as they were beginning to feel like they had overcome all their challenges, the past came knocking once again. Amelia received an unexpected call from her former business partner, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. The conversation started off innocuously enough, but quickly took a turn when her partner informed her that some of their old debts had resurfaced. Debts that, despite their best efforts, had never been fully paid off. Amelia felt a wave of panic rush over her. She thought those debts were behind her, but now they were threatening to come back and undo everything she and Victor had worked for. She hung up the phone and sat in silence, the weight of the news sinking in. Victor walked into the room just moments later, sensing something was wrong. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone filled with concern. Amelia looked up at him, her heart heavy. "There are debts from my old business," she said, her voice shaky. "I thought they were all paid off, but apparently, they're resurfacing, and I don't know how to deal with this." Victor's expression softened, and he walked over to her, kneeling down in front of her. "Amelia, we'll handle this together," he said, his voice firm. "You don't have to face this alone. We'll figure it out, just like we always do. Whatever comes, we'll face it side by side." Amelia felt a wave of relief wash over her at his words. She had been so afraid of facing her past, of dragging Victor into something that wasn't his problem. But here he was, offering his unwavering support, just like he had from the very beginning. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Victor took her hand, squeezing it gently. "There's nothing to thank me for. This is what we do. We take care of each other. Now let's get to work." And with that, they began to tackle the problem together, as partners in every sense of the word. Amelia realized, in that moment, that she had found something far more valuable than security or wealth. She had found someone who loved her for who she was, and who would always have her back, no matter what. As they worked through the challenges ahead, Amelia knew that no matter what obstacles they faced, they would always find a way to overcome them, as long as they had each other. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were no longer just two people bound by a contract. They were a team, united in love, ready to face whatever came next. The weeks that followed were filled with a sense of unity and strength that Amelia had never known before. She and Victor worked side by side, tackling the financial challenges that had once seemed insurmountable. Together, they navigated the rough waters of debt and obligations, and each step they took only brought them closer. Amelia had always been independent, but now, more than ever, she appreciated the value of having someone by her side. Victor's unwavering support had given her the courage to face her past, and together, they were building a future she had once only dreamed of. But with every victory came a new set of obstacles, and the latest challenge came in the form of a business rival who had long held a grudge against Victor. The man, an old associate of Victor's, had been involved in a failed venture years ago, and since then, had sought every opportunity to undermine Victor's success. This time, however, he had gone too far. He had somehow managed to manipulate the press into printing damaging stories about Victor's business practices, putting their entire empire at risk. Amelia was furious. She had watched as Victor had worked tirelessly for years to build his reputation and his business, and now, it was all being threatened by someone who had nothing to lose. She knew they had to fight back, but Victor seemed almost too calm about the situation. "We'll deal with it," he said one evening, his voice steady as he paced around their living room. "This is just a bump in the road. I've dealt with worse." Amelia couldn't understand his calm demeanor. "But this isn't just about you, Victor," she said, her voice rising. "This is about us, our future, everything we've worked for." Victor stopped pacing and turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers with a depth of emotion that took her by surprise. "Amelia, I know how hard this is for you, but I need you to trust me. We've been through worse before. We will get through this too. And this time, I won't let them destroy everything we've built." His words hit her hard. She had been so consumed by the fear of losing everything that she had forgotten to trust him, to believe in his strength. She had been afraid that the world was closing in on them. But Victor had a way of making everything feel like it was under control, even when it seemed like it wasn't. "I do trust you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm just scared." Victor stepped toward her, his hands gently cupping her face. I know, he said softly. But you're not alone in this. We're in this together. Always. In the days that followed, they worked together to clear Victor's name, using every resource at their disposal. It was a long and difficult fight, but in the end, they emerged victorious. The rivals' claims were proven false, and the media retracted the damaging stories. It was a hard-won battle, but it was a testament to the strength of their partnership. As they sat together in their office, watching the news reports that celebrated their victory, Victor turned to Amelia with a smile. I told you we'd get through this, he said, his eyes sparkling with pride. Amelia smiled back, a sense of relief washing over her. She had been so afraid, but in the end, they had made it through. Together. It was a turning point in their relationship. Amelia realized that no matter what challenges they faced, no matter what came their way, she could face it as long as Victor was by her side. They were no longer just a couple bound by a contract. They were partners in every sense of the word, stronger together than they had ever been apart. And as they sat there, side by side, watching the world move forward, Amelia couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but as long as they had each other, she knew they could face anything. The love that had begun as a business arrangement had grown into something real, something undeniable. They had built a life together, and nothing, not even the hardest of times, could take that away. Amelia leaned her head on Victor's shoulder, content in the knowledge that they had found something rare, something beautiful. And as the future stretched out before them, she knew they would face it with the same courage, trust, and love that had carried them this far. The months passed, and Amelia and Victor's bond only grew stronger. They had faced the storms of the past together and emerged victorious, their love and partnership cemented in ways neither of them had expected. Their life together was no longer about contracts or appearances. It was about genuine connection, mutual respect, and an unwavering commitment to each other. The media frenzy had quieted, and the business challenges that had once seemed like insurmountable obstacles were now behind them. As they stood side by side, their future looked brighter than ever. But life, as it often does, had a way of throwing new challenges their way. Amelia's past, something she had hoped was behind her, came rushing back with the appearance of a former mentor from her old bookstore days. The woman, who had once been a guiding figure in Amelia's life, now seemed to be in a dire situation. She needed help, and she turned to Amelia for it. Victor had always been the rock in their relationship, steady and calm, but Amelia couldn't help but feel conflicted. She had built a life with Victor, a life that was now filled with joy and stability. But here was someone from her past, a person who had been there when she had nothing. Victor, as always, was understanding. He knew how much this woman meant to Amelia, and though he had his reservations, he trusted her judgment. You don't have to do this alone, he told her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. Whatever you decide, I'll be here to support you. Amelia looked at him, her heart full of gratitude. I don't know if I can help her, Victor. There's so much that's happened since we last spoke, and I'm not sure if I'm even the same person anymore. But I owe her, and I don't want to turn my back on someone who was there for me when I had nothing. Victor smiled softly, his eyes filled with understanding. You've come so far, Amelia. You've built this life with me, and I'm proud of what you've accomplished. But if helping her will bring you peace, then we'll do it together. We've always faced things together, and this will be no different. With Victor's support, Amelia reached out to her old mentor. The conversation was difficult, full of uncomfortable truths and raw emotions. Her mentor's situation was more complicated than Amelia had realized. There were financial troubles, legal issues, and a strained relationship with her family. But Amelia was determined to help. She knew that despite the years that had passed, there was still a bond between them that couldn't be ignored. With Victor by her side, Amelia worked to find solutions, using the resources they had built together to help the woman who had once mentored her. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but together, they managed to turn the situation around. They found a way to provide the help her mentor needed, and in the process, Amelia realized something important. Her past didn't define her, but it had shaped the woman she had become. She wasn't the same person who had entered this marriage with doubts and fears. She was stronger, more confident, and more capable than she had ever imagined. Victor stood by her through it all, never once questioning her decisions. And as the dust settled and her mentor's situation improved, Amelia felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had not only helped someone who had once helped her, but she had also solidified her place in the life she had built with Victor. The challenges they had faced had brought them closer, but it was moments like this that truly tested their bond. They had both grown so much, and with each passing day, they became more certain that they were exactly where they were meant to be. One evening, after the whirlwind of it all had settled, Victor took Amelia's hand and led her to their favorite spot by the window, overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, but it wasn't the city lights that caught Amelia's attention. It was the man standing beside her, the man who had become her everything. "You're incredible," Victor said, his voice soft and full of admiration. "I've always known you were strong, but watching you navigate all of this with such grace, I'm in awe of you, Amelia." Amelia looked at him, her heart swelling with love. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. "You've always been there for me, and now I realize that no matter what happens, we'll always be able to face it together." Victor smiled, pulling her into his arms. "That's the thing about us, Amelia," he said softly. "We don't just face the world together. We build it, hand in hand." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace, Amelia knew that no matter what challenges came next, they would face them together, with love, trust, and unwavering support. This was the life they had built, and it was more than enough. It was everything. As the months continued to pass, Amelia and Victor found themselves more deeply intertwined in each other's lives than ever before. What had started as a simple contract had blossomed into something neither of them had anticipated, a love that was built on mutual trust, respect, and the kind of deep connection that only comes from facing life's challenges together. They had weathered the storms of doubt, fear, and uncertainty, and emerged stronger on the other side. Amelia had grown into a woman she'd barely recognized, someone more confident, more self-assured, and more capable than she had ever believed possible. She had come into this marriage uncertain, desperate for security, but now she had found something even more valuable: love. True, unshakable love. Victor, too, had changed. He had always been a man driven by ambition, by a desire to build an empire, but now he was a man who found strength not just in his wealth, but in his partnership with Amelia. Together, they were unstoppable. They had both found balance in each other, something that transcended money, success, or appearances. It was the quiet moments, the small gestures, that made all the difference. Whether it was the way Victor would pull her close on a quiet evening, or how Amelia would take time to sit with him after a long day, listening to him talk about his work with the same care and interest she had given to her own endeavors, they had become a team in the truest sense of the word. As the years went by, their bond only grew stronger. They traveled the world together, not as business partners, but as a married couple, experiencing the highs and lows of life side by side. They faced challenges, of course, as any couple would, but each time, they found strength in each other. The partnership they had built was one of mutual love and understanding, one that was not built on convenience or obligation, but on a genuine desire to support and grow with one another. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the weight of life seemed too much to bear. But every time they faced a challenge, they came out stronger. There was no obstacle too great, no hurdle too high, that they couldn't overcome together. And then, one evening, after a particularly busy week, Victor surprised Amelia with a quiet dinner at home. The table was set with candles, soft music playing in the background. It was the kind of gesture that spoke volumes about the way he had come to understand her, the way he knew what she needed, even without her saying a word. As they sat down to eat, Victor looked at her with a softness in his eyes that she had come to cherish. "Amelia," he began, his voice low and sincere, "when we first met, I never could have imagined that us, would be where we are now. But I'm grateful every day that we found each other. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible." Amelia's heart swelled as she listened to him, his words ringing true in a way that took her breath away. She had come into this marriage so unsure, so afraid of what the future held. But now, sitting across from the man she loved, she realized that all the doubts she had once carried had faded into nothing. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "When I married you, I thought it was just for survival. But now, I see that it was the best decision I could have ever made. I love you, Victor, more than words can express." Victor reached across the table, taking her hand in his thumb brushing over her skin in a gesture that spoke volumes. "And I love you, Amelia. I always have. From the very beginning. Even when I didn't know it yet, I loved you." The moment hung in the air, quiet but filled with the weight of everything they had been through. Amelia knew, deep in her heart, that this was the life she had always dreamed of. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't without its struggles. But it was real. And it was theirs. They had built something beautiful together. And as they sat there, holding hands, it was clear that this was only the beginning. The journey they had started together had no end, only new beginnings. They had found their home, not in a place or in wealth, but in each other. And as the candles flickered and the night stretched on, Amelia knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, side by side, with love and strength. The love they had found was not fleeting, but something that would endure for a lifetime, something that had been built from the ground up, piece by piece, with trust, patience, and unwavering commitment. The story of their marriage was not one of fairy tales, but one of real, raw love. And Amelia knew that this was the life she had always been meant to have, a life full of love, joy, and the kind of happiness she had once thought impossible. With Victor by her side, she was ready for whatever the future would bring.